I am a lighthouse keeper, or I was. The Coast Guard automated most of the remaining staffed lighthouses in the 1990s, and the one I tended, on a headland on the central Oregon coast, about 12 miles south of Newport, was automated in 1994. I stayed anyway, not as an official keeper, as a caretaker, which is a different thing, a volunteer position, maintained through an agreement between the Coast Guard and the Oregon Parks system. That allowed me to live on the property in exchange for maintenance and public interpretation on weekends. I stayed for 22 years after the automation. I left in 2016, when my knees finally decided that the path down to the water was not something they were willing to negotiate anymore. I am 78 years old. My name is Harold Finch. I live in Newport now, in a small house 3 blocks from the water, close enough to hear the ocean at night, which is a condition I set when I was looking. I was a keeper for 31 years. 22 of those years, I was alone on that headland. I am going to tell you what I was not alone with. The lighthouse sits on a headland that juts out into the Pacific, about 80 feet above the water at high tide. On the landward side, the headland drops back into a coastal forest. Sitka spruce mostly, with some shore pine and red alder in the lower areas near the creek. The forest is dense, the way Oregon coastal forest is dense, which is to say, almost impenetrably. The spruce growing so close together, and the understory so thick with salale and sword fern, that 30 feet in you cannot see the headland anymore. It is not a large forest, maybe 200 acres, bounded by the highway to the east and the headland to the west and private property to the north and south. But it is old forest, old growth in patches, second growth in others. And it has that quality that old coastal forest has, a quality of enclosure, of being inside something, of the world beyond the trees, being very far away even when it is not. I walked that forest every day. For 31 years, I walked it. I knew every trail, every drainage, every place where the elk bedded, and every place where the deer browsed, and every place where the creek pooled deep enough for cutthroat in spring. I knew what was in that forest, until I didn't. The first indication came in the winter of 1985. I had been on the headland for 8 years. It was January, and the storms were coming in hard off the Pacific, and the lighthouse was earning its existence in the way lighthouses earn their existence, being visible in conditions that made visibility nearly impossible. I had come in from checking the light, and I was in the keeper's house, and I heard something on the seaward side of the property. Not the storm. I knew the storm. I had been listening to Pacific storms for 8 years, and I knew every sound they made. This was not the storm. It was. And I am going to use the word carefully because I choose my words carefully. A call. From somewhere at the edge of the forest, on the north side of the headland, in the spruce. Long, low, carrying, in the way that certain sounds carry through storm wind. Not because they are loud, but because they are at the right frequency to cut through the noise. I went to the window. I could see nothing. The storm made seeing nothing very easy. I heard it again, and then, from farther away, from somewhere south along the coast, an answer. I stood at the window for a long time. The storm continued. The sounds did not come again. I wrote it in my log, because I kept a log, and keepers log what they observe, and I was a keeper, and this was something I had observed. I wrote, 11:40 p.m., Heard unidentified vocalizations, 2 occurrences, north and south of headland, during storm conditions. Not identifiable as any known marine mammal or seabird. Low frequency, long duration. Will note if recurs. It recurred. Not often, but regularly. Over the next 23 years, I logged 47 instances, 47 times, in 31 years. I heard sounds from the coastal forest that I could not identify. I am a methodical man. I had eliminated, by the 5th year, every reasonable explanation. Elk, sea lions, storm effects on the forest structure, equipment sounds from the highway. None of them fit. I kept logging. That is what keepers do. I saw something in the spring of 1991. I had gone down the trail to the creek to check on a drainage that had been giving me trouble after a wet winter. It was early morning. The light was flat and gray, the way coastal light is flat and gray before the sun gets above the ridge. I was crouching at the edge of the creek when I became aware that something was watching me from the far bank. Not a feeling, an awareness, a specific, located awareness, in the way that you are aware of a person standing near you in a dark room. I looked up slowly. Across the creek, in the shadow of the spruce, something was standing very still. It was large, dark, on 2 feet, fully upright, in the way that nothing that large stands fully upright in a coastal forest. We looked at each other across the creek. The creek was not wide, 8 feet, maybe 10. I could see it clearly. It could see me clearly. Neither of us moved. I'm going to tell you what I thought in that moment, because I think it matters. I thought, so that is what has been making those sounds. Not, what is that? Not, am I in danger? Not, this is impossible. So that is what has been making those sounds. 6 years of logging 47 instances had prepared me, in some way I had not consciously understood, for the moment when I would see the thing that was making them. It stood for about 3 minutes, and then it moved back into the spruce, in the way that things move when they have finished doing what they came to do. I crouched at the creek for a while longer, and then I checked the drainage, and then I went back to the lighthouse, and I logged it. I wrote 6:15 a.m., observed unidentified bipedal subject, North Creek drainage, opposite bank, distance approximately 8 to 10 feet, duration approximately 3 minutes, dark coloration, height estimated 7 to 8 feet. Subject appeared to observe me, did not approach, withdrew into spruce stand. No vocalization, no aggressive behavior. Clear morning light, positive identification of bipedal stance and general morphology. And then I made breakfast, because I was a keeper, and keepers make breakfast. Over the following years, I had 4 more clear sightings, all in the coastal forest, all brief, all with the same quality, of something that had been present for a long time and was not particularly concerned about being seen, and was not particularly interested in interaction, and was, in a word I keep coming back to, resident. It was resident in that forest, the way I was resident on that headland. We were neighbors. We had been neighbors for years before I understood that. After 1991, I understood it, and I conducted myself accordingly. I did not try to track it. I did not set cameras. I did not tell anyone, because I was the lighthouse keeper. And the lighthouse keeper reports what he observes in his log, and his log is an official document. And I was not going to put something in an official document that I could not support with conventional evidence. What I did was this. I went on walking the forest, every day, the same trails, at the same hours. I talked, as I walked, the way I had always talked to myself, because solitary people develop that habit, and it is a good habit, and I was not going to change it. I narrated what I was doing. I said the names of things. I talked about the light, which is what lighthouse keepers talk about, because the light is the job, and the job is what you have when you have a solitary life. And I kept logging, not the ordinary things. Those I logged officially. The other things, the sounds and the presence, and the occasional disturbance in the forest that suggested something large, moving through it with deliberate care. Those I logged in a separate notebook. I have that notebook. It covers 23 years. It is, I think, the most complete record of this kind that anyone has kept without knowing they were keeping it. I kept it because I am a keeper, because logging what you observe is what keepers do, because the thing you are observing does not have to be what you expected to observe in order to deserve to be observed carefully. The last entry in that notebook is from October of 2015, 6 months before I left the headland. It says, 4:45 a.m. vocalization, northwest, in the spruce above the headland trail. Single, long, direction of travel unclear. Last logged instance was 14 months ago. I've been thinking about leaving. I wonder if it knows. I wonder if the pattern of my walking has changed in ways I have not consciously registered, and if something that has been watching a person walk the same trails for 30 years can read a change in that pattern and understand what the change means. I don't know the answer to that. I left in the spring. I did not say goodbye. I did not know how. I still do not know how. But I think about the October morning in 1991, crouching at the creek, looking across 8 feet of water at something that had been making sounds in the storm for 6 years, and thinking, so that is what has been making those sounds. And I think about 30 years of walking the same forest, with something resident in it, patient and dark and old in the way that coastal things are old, worn smooth by weather and time and the long repetition of the ocean. And I think, that is a life. That is a whole life. Not the lighthouse, not the log, not the light, though those too. But also 30 years of walking a coastal forest and being known in it by something that knew it better than I did, and for longer. And that made room for me anyway. That made room for a keeper on a headland, and let him log his 47 instances, and never once came through the fence. I am grateful, in the plain way, in the enough way. I am 78 years old. I can hear the ocean from my house, and sometimes, at night, when the wind is coming off the water and the conditions are right, I hear something that is not the ocean. Low, long, carrying. I cannot be certain, but I log it anyway, because I am a keeper, and keepers log what they observe. That is the whole of it. That is everything.